What's up, Motorcycles fam? What we got today is I had the Dodge in here, the 2005 Dodge Ram 1500 that we were driving around. Brakes were a little weird in it, so I brought it in yesterday, did the brakes, and Chevelle told me her car, the brakes were acting a little funny on it as well. So what we got today is Chevelle's 2013 Legacy. It's an all-wheel drive. It's got the 4-cylinder in it, I think. But the brakes were doing about the same thing as the Dodge. They kind of have warped rotors, worn out pads would be my guess. And it has an oil leak on the front. And it's getting a little worse, so we figured we'd track that down. Kind of doing our version of spring cleaning, which is spring maintenance on all the vehicles, because we have a bunch of them. So before we get into the wrecker that we're calling the Turtle, and we have another project that was brought in from a friend of mine. It's a 70s model C65 Chevy truck, and my dad built the motor for it many years ago, like 25 years ago, and I think it has a 427 big block Chevy industrial motor in it, and it's a good truck. It ran good. He tends to have some problems with carburetors, and it's ranch, so you know, carburetors get gum up or mouse's nests or whatever, and the truck will catch on fire. It's not the first one. I did one a while back, rewired the engine compartment and stuff because it had done the same thing. We're gonna do it on the next one too, but that's down the road here a few days. We're gonna get Chevelle's car dealt with today, see if we can't get it sorted out, find the oil leak, fix the brakes, and then go from there. So here we go. So we're gonna see if we can't see the oil leak from up here. The only spot I can see is down here by below the dampener. You can't terribly well see it where you're at, but there is some oil down in there, kind of around the dampener, which could be a front seal. Bad in it. You try and find a clean spot around the dirty spots, and that'll kind of tell you where the oil's flowing. This isn't a leak that's really been that bad. It's just annoying. It drips down on the exhaust down there, and then it makes a smell, and I guess it's now starting to leave a little bit of a mark on the driveway. So we're gonna pick this thing up, look at it from the bottom, and check the brakes out too. So I gave the car a once over, and basically what I found looking at it is the brakes all look really good on the car, as you can see here, or you can't really see here, but I want to pull the wheels off and check them anyways, just to see. It could have a warped rotor or something, but the rotors look pretty good, really. I mean, they're not grooved up. They're nothing out of the ordinary on there. The pads look like they got plenty of life left in them too. Doing a little hunting around, trying to find out where this leak is. You usually go to the farthest forward, furthest up spot that you find the leak, and that's where it's coming from, which would be the harmonic balancer from what I can see here. It's definitely wet down here, and it's dripping down onto the exhaust. It's getting up here, kind of a little bit everywhere. But the furthest forward, the highest up, wet spot, and that's where it is. So I bet it's coming from that harmonic balancer seal. So we'll pull that and check it out and change the seal just in case. It's probably going to be the problem. We'll know if we're careful when we get it off there. We can see the pattern of the oil and the dirt. And so if it's clean below it, we know the oil's leaking out of there in a good enough spot or paste to wash the dirt away. If it's not clean, then it's not leaking enough to wash the dirt away, so it's not a significant leak, would be what I'd say. So we'll dig into this and then go from there. All right, we're back. I'm gonna walk you through what I've got done so far. So we got the front rotors and the rear rotors off. They weren't bad to get off. I just took the caliper brackets loose completely, and then just let the calipers and the caliper brackets off. And then they got holes in the rotors with threaded holes in the rotors. And you put a push bolt in there, it pushes them right off. It's pretty easy to deal with. You can see right here and right here is where I use the push bolts. The rotors look good. I figure we're gonna cut them on the brake lathe. So I blasted them up, painted them up. But it's kind of nice when you have a brake lathe because you can paint them and you can paint the surfaces that you shouldn't paint, and then we'll end up machining them and it will stay, no paint on it, and it'll work really good, and then the rest of it will stay protected. So I think that'll work out really well. It definitely, not I think, it will work out very well. So that's where they're at. Tomorrow, when this paint's all dried up real good, we're going to come in, we'll put them on the brake lathe, we'll cut the brake surfaces, and they'll be just like new, except for better. Well, I guess as long as they're not too hard to cut on the brake lathe. Hard rotors and the quality of rotors has gone down quite a bit. It used to be you could pretty much cut anything unless they've been really hot and really warped. But nowadays, I think the quality's not very good. I had some on the Dodge that I just did, and basically the problem we had was it was just too hard. Like they chattered really badly. So I made do with it, but it wasn't the prettiest thing. So we'll see tomorrow on how this works. So it is the next morning down here. We're back in the back of the sales area here. That's where I have the brake lathe that cuts rotors and drums and that sort of stuff. It's kind of an old school technology and way of doing stuff, but I grew up doing it, so I still like to do it. So here's what we got. Basically what you do, this is an AAMCO brake lathe that's been around forever. They never changed the design. They still sell them to this day. I got the disc brake, or the twin facing tool, hooked up to it. This is the front rotor off Chevelle's car. As you can see, the wear plate or pad is right here. We painted it yesterday and we get machined off. So the lighting's not very good back here, but it's not somewhere I usually hang out. But basically we get it mounted up. This is the flat surface. There's a little bit of a taper on the inside of the flange. Let's see if I can show you. You can see there's a little taper on this side. So I try and put the tapered adapter on the taper side. It doesn't usually match it, but it just makes me feel better about life. And then the flat flange right here. I put on the flat flange here. I make sure it's good and flat. Sometimes I run a file over them. These I blasted before I painted them. And so we get everything set up. We get it centered up. We get everything right. And then we go into where the bits just touch it with the machine on, and then I usually go into where it doesn't touch, because there's a little groove cut in it right here, and I'll add a couple thousandths to it, and then we'll make a first cut. We'll see how out of straight it is, because it will be, if it's warped, it'll be hitting in some areas and not in others. So like I said, we're on the spot where it doesn't touch right now, and I've already ran it in probably 4 thousandths, and so we'll turn the drive on, or the feed on, and we'll do our first cut here. And we got a vibration band on it, this rubber band here. It kind of keeps the harmonics down. If you got a hard rotor, they will chatter on the cutters, and it will make a really weird file-looking pattern on it. And you can either cut it past it, but there's minimum and maximum thicknesses. I think this one, I don't remember what it is, but usually they're cast into the rotor or drum somewhere. And so after you get done cutting them, or before you cut them, you can see how much meat you got left, and then after you cut them, you can see what you got left to make sure you're still within tolerances. And you can see here, everything's flat and straight, but we're warped for sure. So we just got done with our first cut, and it's a good cut. It's not chattering. It's nice and smooth. You can see that the other half, the rotor there, is not touching. And so on this side, the opposite side, it'll be the opposite way because the rotor's warped. And so we can see that it is a good cut on this side too. The other thing worth noting is sometimes there's a ridge up here and a ridge down here, and you need to make sure that them are cut out before you get too crazy trying to cut in the center. So you touch in the center, you pull it out to the back, push it into the front, cut both them ridges out first when you're just barely touching in the center. And if it's too much, you can back them back off a little bit and cut them out, in a couple cuts on the edges. It's just where the brake pads don't touch. So that's where we're at now. We're going to probably add another 4 thousandths and see if we can get it to come out more. So here we go. So now, if you look at the shape of the two patterns we got going on here, let's see if I can roll this a little bit. This pattern right here has pretty clearly defined edges, and it's probably a quarter of the rotor. And then this pattern over here is almost all the way around right here, and it's a lot further, and it's got feathered edges. So they've worn differently. Let's see if I can get a little more light over here so you can see the difference in the pattern there. So they've worn differently, and then that's what makes a warped rotor even worse, is different patterns from side to side. So the other one comes out further, and they're just a little different than each other, and that'll make the pedal fluctuate, and it'll give you vibrations and that sort of stuff. I mean, warped rotors do it too, but this is kind of a compound warped rotor. They're different side to side, as well as different, around. So we're going to take another cut of another 4 thousandths. This is our third cut of 4 thousandths, so we got 12 thousandths off of each side. As you can see, we are still missing this. It's getting pretty close though. We've shaved the paint in most areas. And so I think one more cut and we'll have that. This side, we've got it all, and it goes all the way around, and it just barely left any paint down here on this area here. It's got it most of the way cleaned off, so one more cut. But it's different to see how, or it's interesting to see how different the patterns are side for side. And that's where you end up with brakes that are shaky, and when you go to slow down, it kind of vibrates or makes a noise, that sort of deal. And that's where warped rotors come in. So we're going to do one more cut. right, here's after our last cut here. Everything's nice and smooth. The rotor's really pretty. We are good to go on that one. Everything looks good. So we're gonna pull this one off and we're gonna put the other one on. All right, we got the front rotors cut. Now we're moving on to the back. I kind of touched my face with all this dirt and everything else, so it looks like I'm pretty dirty. There's just a lot of dust and metal dust floating around in here. It's probably not the best to breathe, but yeah, I don't know. I've done it since I was a kid, so we'll keep on doing it. Well, we're back. We got done machining all them brake rotors, all 4 of them. The rears say on the inside, and I'll show you right here. So on the inside, it says minimum thickness 8.5 millimeters, and then the maximum diameter for the brake drum is 191 millimeters. The front ones say minimum thickness is 22 millimeters. My guess is the next time we need them for the rear, We are 22, almost 23 millimeters, 22.94. And that one's 23.22. So we're good to go on this. So they're all within spec. The rear ones are close. So next time they'll have to be changed. But for right now, I don't mean, really, they're 50 bucks a piece. So I don't know if it's really worth the hassle of cutting them. But I guess for nostalgia purposes, I like to do it. So we'll get them back on and check back in. All right, everybody, we got the rotors back on, the caliper back on, all that stuff going the right direction. And I'll give you a little view of this and see, show you what it looks like, I guess. All right, so that's the rear. We got it on. I didn't unadjust the park brake, so I don't have to adjust the park brake. I didn't cut the park brake surface either inside the drum. It's because it really wasn't worn. It's not a big deal. But the outside, where the brakes, where the rotor I cut, it looks good. Next time we service these, we'll have to buy new rotors because they're close to the minimum. I also didn't put new brake pads on it because they were good. So we got it all lined out. Rears and fronts, got the lug nuts torqued down. And everything looks good. I mean, it's really nice having them painted up. The ones on my 69 Camaro, I actually had powder coated. And then we cut them on the brake lathe with high temp powder coat. And so we cut them on the brake lathe and they look amazing. And they'll live for a long time. We actually had all the spindle, the caliper, everything powder coated, and then we went and machined everything. The dust cover we had powder coated silver, all in high temp powder coat, so it should be really awesome. The other thing worth mentioning, and I always caution everybody about this, is anytime you're doing your brakes or working on brakes or any of that stuff, whenever you get ready to go, always push the pedal, pump it up, because I have seen it firsthand. Guys hop in a car, and after they get done doing brakes, and they hop in, they fire it up, they put it in reverse, and the first time they go step on the brakes, there's no brakes. Because when you push the pucks back into the calipers, it takes a couple pumps for them to come out the distance it needs to touch the rotor. And so you don't have brakes for a couple pumps. And I had a friend of mine, a good mechanic, he just forgot about it, doing brakes on his daughter's car, hopped in it, and his driveway had kind of a incline, or whatever you want to call it, down to the street. And he hopped in his daughter's car and went to back it out and move it out of the garage, and he didn't have brakes. And he ended up going across the street and hitting his neighbor's mailbox. So, ever since then, I've always been really cautious about it. I was always cautious about it before, but it's just kind of one of them stories that every time I work on brakes, it stays in my head. So always make sure to pump them up. Make sure you have brakes before you go anywhere after you've worked on them. And so we'll let this thing down and start working on the seal. All right, well, we got it back together, and I did video. It was kind of a pain with just me being by myself, so I'll show you what I got done. So we got the harmonic balancer back on it, or lower pulley, or whatever you want to call it. Behind the balancer, there is a piece, there's a spacer that goes into the front cover there. So you take a pair of pliers, pull it out. It's also the oil pump drive. It's got a keyway to go to the crankshaft. It drives the oil pump. And once you get that out, that seal comes right out of there real easy. And then basically you put another seal back in it. It wasn't too hard. It kind of made me a little nervous because you could put that seal in by hand. I mean, it was not a loose fit, but it was not as tight as I'd like it. So I put a little gasket cinch on it, Edelbrock product. It works really good, a little adhesive basically. Something that ain't gonna clog up the oil galleries or none of that stuff. It's just a thin film adhesive. It works good. It's good stuff. Look it up. Edelbrock makes it. Gasket cinch. Put some gasket cinch on it. Put it in. Let it cure, and then lubed up everything. Put it all back together, and now we're gonna try it. Well, everything seems to be running okay. It's high idling right now till it warms up. So I'm going to pump the brakes up. It's still on lift. Now they're there. Get all the calipers to seat. and get down to the rotors, that whole deal. And then now it's got good brakes, so I don't have to worry about that. We don't have no bad lights, I think, other than the temperature's low, engine temperature's low light. I don't know, it's not that low, but whatever. So we will go from there. The battery in this car is a little weak too. I think that might replace it. We'll see. She hasn't left her walking yet. Maybe one of these days. So we'll see if I want to replace it now or later. Always give your brakes a minute to set, just to make sure you don't have any air in it, and then hit the brake pedal again, and if they're still good, then they're going to be good. If you got air in the system, they'll get spongy after you pumped them up, and then you have to go through and bleed them. You shouldn't have to bleed them unless you open up the system, or open up the system when you're doing brakes, but it's always a good idea to check because you never know. Everything seems to be good on this thing. I think we're happy with it. I'm going to look for oil leaks and we'll kind of go from there. So Chevelle's car is now done. Looked for leaks, I don't see nothing, and she's just going to have to drive it and we're going to have to see how it does. It wasn't a very bad leak to start with, but it definitely needed changed. The car is warmed up now. It's kicked down to low idle and we're ready to take it out of there. I'll give you one walk around. So it looks good. We'll check the lug nuts for torque in a day or two, just to make sure that everything's good, probably 50 miles or so. And other than that, it should be good to go. It should be good for another while. I think that's it on her car, so thanks for watching.
You really do need a capital one.
I do.
Yeah.
I'm like,